trickier. And so one of the things that I did as a special ed social worker is from the time that I felt that it was age appropriate, typically 3rd grade, if they were on an IEP, we talked about it. And I tried to help them better understand that they do things differently, they need things differently. Because as you all know, if you're told over and over you're not good enough, you begin to believe you're not good enough. And so part of what you can do, if this is the field you're going in, is please make these children believe that they are good enough. Because most of them are actually really quite bright, but they just need something different for them. And I just hope that that speaks to you. Yes, we have a lot of kids that are have intelligence issues, there's no doubt, but many that's not the case for. And so I just think I'm really passionate about being an advocate for them and trying to build them up. Because I always said I had a young man in high school who dropped out. He just didn't show up to school one day, and I just drove around the little town that I was working in looking for him, because I knew that somewhere on the streets was a young man with an IQ of 136. And who knows, maybe the cure to cancer is inside that brain, right? And I was like, I'm not letting him give up just because reading's hard, right? And that's what it is also part of when you say an exceptional learner. Reading, couldn't read well, but man, super bright.
I think that's another thing too, just everybody's got the ability to learn. So it's our jobs to try to figure out where that's at. Any of you ever seen 50 First Dates, kind of older movie? She keeps forgetting things every day. That's a lot like those kids that we see, the kids that are labeled severe learning disabilities or specific learning disabilities. And that's where it gets frustrating, not only for them, but for that general education teacher. Because on Monday, that student's gonna know how to do double-digit multiplication. And on Tuesday, that student's gonna put the pencil on the paper and not get started because they forgot everything. And so that's gonna cause huge frustration coming from that gen ed teacher, because you did it yesterday, why can't you do it today? I need you to do it now. And then they get frustrated, and then that student gets frustrated. And so you have to, like I said, and then it's also your jobs, meaning if you're going into special ed, I don't know how many are looking at that route or what, but you have to almost coach those general education teachers and have good rapport with them as well, because your job could become a nightmare, or it could become very, very well, very good.
Are any of you special ed majors?
Nope.
Are you gen ed majors? Elementary, secondary. Okay.
So here's a piece of info. I got an elementary ed degree from Central. We'll talk later. Special ed, if you're deciding as you get rolled, I mean, I graduated and the last thing I wanted to do was go back to school. But special education is your foot into a lot of places and a lot of doors. So, quick sidebar, I got hired in the ISD, which is in town here, at Eagle Village. Court appointed kids are going there, sent by the courts, 9 to 12 months on average they stay. We were just talking briefly about that. I had to go back and get emergency certified in order to have a classroom. So I had to go back and take 2 classes in special education, 2 classes a year minimum in order to keep that emergency certification. So I did that, and then eventually it led me to a teacher consultant position. That's where I met Danette, and did that for almost 6.5 years. And then from there, I ended up in Big Rapids where I met Miss Mooney over here. She got to hang out with me for a while. So special ed gets your foot in the door. If you are starting, once you graduate and you struggle not getting the job you want, although this day and age you might have a pickings because that COVID thing did a number. That COVID thing did a number to a lot of teachers, and they're getting out. And so hopefully you're all ready to go. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, passion and purpose. If you have that, you'll be well, you'll be good, and you'll like your job.
And then when you want to go get your master's degree, special education school social work is awesome. So I'll plug my department and what I do. And I help create the special education school social work classes here at Ferris that are Michigan Department of Ed. And so there's something that if you want to do both, where you can still be in education and still work with special education students, kind of a nice option for you.
Real ADHD moment. You cannot have an IEP and a 504.
or an IEP that dissolves into a Final Four. But you can't have both, and go Broncos.
I'll sit in the middle, maybe.
So it sounds like we already started touching on the subject, but what would you say is the most rewarding part of working with our exceptional learners in your career?
I would say those light bulb moments for me. And what I mean by those light bulb moments are those moments where, Johnny's just not getting it. My first year teaching, I taught with this kid, I'll call him Johnny. And he came in, his label is CI, cognitively impaired, which is one of my 2 certifications, CI and LD. And he came in and he could not put pencil to paper and just form letters and numbers. Super intelligent in other ways. He could talk circles around you, right? He could tell you exactly how to tune your car so that it goes zoom, right? But he couldn't put pencil to paper and write his name and numbers. And every day I would come in and I'd say, all right, well, we're working on our math, and he could verbally tell me, yep, 3 times 3 is 9 and the square root of 81. And he could tell me all these things, but he couldn't write it down. And I'll say, all right, dude, I bought these handwriting books, those old school, like 2 solid lines and the dotted line in the middle with the giant letters. You guys know what I'm talking about. You're thinking like 2nd grade, 1st grade, right? And I brought him into it, and he was like, I'm not doing that shit. Excuse my language, but I was like, all right, but you are, right? He wasn't doing it. I went out and I found on Amazon, Handwriting for Teens. It was the exact same book, but on the front it said 4 teens, right? So it was cool. And so I gave it to him on like the last day of school. And I said, just do this over the summer, it'd be totally cool, whatever. And I came home, and he knew where I lived, because I lived in the area where I teach. And I came home one day, and he wrote his name on my stoop with chalk. And I was like, it took me a second to realize, like, who the heck, that's kind of weird. And then I finally realized whose name it was, and he came back the next day. He was like, look, Mr. Barnes, I can write. And so, so I had him, that was in 6th grade, at the end of between 6th and 7th grade. So I had him all the way through 8th grade, and just that light bulb moment of it clicked, like, oh, an E is this thing, right? And an M is the same thing, but on its side. And if you stand back up and make it loopy, it's a 3, and so all those things, it's just that light bulb moment of like, oh, and that was a little more of an extreme case, but it happens all the time. When you're working on balancing equations, you're like, oh, what you do to one side, you have to do the other. What does that even mean? Well, if subtract here, you have to, oh, and then it just clicks. How many of you have any kind of field experience, like you're in a classroom at all, daycare, anything like that? Have you ever seen that moment for a kid when you're just like, it just pops, it just clicks, and the bubble bursts, and you realize that's what I'm in it for. It's the light bulb moment for me.
Of course, and I'm the social emotional learning person on the special ed realm, and I think for me, it's providing them with an adult that can accept them unconditionally, because a lot of them come from homes where they don't have it. And so knowing that my office was a safe place for them, knowing that their traumas could be talked about, please be trauma informed. Learn everything you can. It causes the brain to change, literally structure. Eat up all that you can on trauma. Trauma is fabulous. And our social work department is 100% trauma informed here at Ferris, and our classes are trauma informed, and there's a reason for it. As a matter of fact, one of my students last year, a capstone master's level student, wrote about what if trauma was the 14th eligibility category for an IEP. It would absolutely bankrupt education if that was the case. It would. Anybody in special ed would say that. There's not enough money. But that is to really hammer home the impact of the trauma that children are coming with. And for me, if I could, I think the gen ed teachers looked at me as a savior too. Like, I could get the call and they'd be like, Danette, come get so-and-so, I'm on my way, and you could just see they're at their limit, right? And if I can also not only service and be that support for the student, I also looked at my job as being a break, and teachers do need them. Like, it is a hard job. My parents were both teachers. And so when people say, why didn't you become a teacher? Well, because my parents were both teachers. But I knew I wanted to help kids, and I knew I wanted to be in education. I just didn't want to do it that way. But those light bulb moments, or those moments where a kid will say to you, thanks for not giving up on me. Thanks for believing in me, or, you know, helping me. And that just, those are things, I have so many. One thing I regret that I did not do, you're going out into this field, buy yourself a traditional hardbound journal, where when something happens, you can jot, you don't have to journal, just write it down, a phrase that a student said to you, put the date on it, treasure those. I didn't start at the early part of my career, but I did towards the middle, and I have some of those. And there's gonna be days where you wanna give up and you wanna walk out, and you open that journal and you read what former students have said to you, those things that fill your cup back up. And those are the things that we keep going. You have to have them, because there are really rough days in education. There are, but there are beautiful days too.
So it's like I said, you gotta have that passion, purpose. I'm assuming all your parents have told you, you know, behave. What does that mean? What does it look like? Well, my kid's a sophomore. So I'm like, all right, you need to be careful what you do, what you say, how you act, especially in public, because there's always somebody watching you. Whether it's another peer or a younger sibling of some sort. And so along those lines, I didn't know I was being watched my very first year teaching at Eagle Village. I had the highest functioning group, and that's boys and girls from 12 to 17. So you want to talk about differentiated instruction. And so one of the girls in there, I didn't really have much of a rapport with for whatever rhyme or reason. I don't know why. But when she was dismissed from the facility, all of a sudden I got a letter. It was not from her, but it was from some organization. And she submitted my name to some like outstanding teacher, something, and my name got in a book for that year. And so you were just saying about why you in it. I don't even remember having any conversation with her, but for some odd reason, I either smile at her, and sometimes that's all it takes, by the way, right? You've probably heard that or seen that. Even if you smile at somebody, or wave to them, or joke around with them, even if they don't respond, or if they do something, whatever, that could be it. That could change their whole day. But anyway, this girl put that in the book. I never did get a chance to reconnect with her, because she was at Eagle Village, and she was court appointed, and she went her own way, and I thought that was kind of cool. So those are the things, just like they both said. Right when you want to quit, because there are days, especially in your beginning, there's going to be days, those are going to be your hardest. They told me when I student taught, they probably told you the same thing. You should not have a job when you're student teaching, because you will not have time for it when you're student teaching, because you will be busy.
See, they told me that, but I don't know about you guys, but I needed money. I gotta pay the bills. So yeah, I agree. If you can do it, then dope. Don't, try not to, work. But at the same time, what I did is I tried to I got a job that would complement what I was doing and gave me different skills. Being special ed during my internship, and being special ed at Western, I had to do a full year final internship. So I had to do a full semester of general education and a full semester of special education. Because when you're special ed, you're dual certified in at least 2 different things, right? Because what people don't realize is special education is not a license, it's an endorsement. So legally speaking, I'm an elementary school teacher with a special ed endorsement. I would get fired working in elementary school. I would. I'd smack a kid or something. But not literally. But that's what a lot of people don't realize. And so what I did is I worked at the Boys and Girls Club of Kalamazoo, and I did home care for a young man with autism and helped hone my skills. So I was working, but it made me a better intern, it made me a better teacher. So if you're in a position like I am, where like I was, where I had to work and I was kind of doing the traditional-ish special ed route, right? Then try to, 2 birds, 1 stone. Why not get better at what your career and your passion is, right? And at the same time. But if you can help it, yeah, don't work.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the audience now. I know a lot of you guys have a bunch of questions.